Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Parenting in the Far North. I'm your host, Ariane Aramburo. Today's guest is Lena Morgan, a retired midwife, communications expert, and author of The Fight Languages, a powerful conflict resolution system designed to help people translate conflict and spark connection. With more than a decade of experience helping people advocate for themselves in tense situations, Lena saw the need for a quick and easy framework that would have everyone feeling understood. The Fight Languages are now changing the conversations for partners, for parents, teachers, even CEOs. Please welcome to the podcast, everyone, Lena Morgan. Thank you so much for being here. So excited to hear about this topic.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I love any opportunity we can have people communicating better.
We are in the business of it. And of course, the book here, Fight Languages, and when you hear that, and I was, talking with you before we kind of get into it, I was thinking love languages. So Fight Languages, I'm interested to hear this. But before we delve into all those topics, just give us a little, recap. I mean, we gave an intro here, but just a little bit more about you. Are you from Alaska?
Yeah, most of my life has been up here. I am Pacific Northwest born and bred.
Yeah.
And, being in Alaska and bringing these new ideas, I feel like Alaskans are known for ingenuity when it comes to figuring things out. And I love being able to bring the communication component in there as well.
All right. So what inspired you to develop Fight Languages, and how did your experiences, I guess, just in life help you kind of develop this whole framework?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in midwifery, which seems like it might not have anything to do with communication, except obviously it has everything to do with communication. When we're going through these big transformational life phases, to be able to be understood and heard and advocate for ourselves in those spaces is critically important to feeling in control and empowered. And if you're missing that part of it, the whole situation can go sideways in ways that have long-term and lasting effects. So I realized after I left midwifery, due to PTSD and burnout, anything in the birth world, man, things get really heavy really fast. And so I wanted to do something that was still empowering women and working with families. And this framework, I was like, wait, I know exactly how to talk to these different people. I've been practicing this for over a decade, and it really came together so quick as to, sitting down, okay, who are the 5 types of people in a fight? Bam. I could name them. I knew who they were. I'd been figuring out how to communicate.
You were dealing with that on a day-to-day basis. So you kind of had to learn to navigate and do, okay, that's interesting.
Yep. And then I was able to articulate it, start doing workshops. Putting it online was a game changer because it went immediately viral. And I was like, okay, people get it. People want this information about how they can connect with their partners, with their parents, with their kids, wherever it is. It makes it so quick and easy.
And the title just jumps out. I mean, you hear Fight Languages, a lot of people, my way is the right way. I want to be heard. And you're taking conflict into connection. So kind of walk me a little bit through that. And then also, what are the Fight Languages? And can you kind of break each one down, what we're looking at?
Absolutely. So to compare it to the love languages are how we want to be loved, how we want someone to show us love. Fight languages are how we want to be understood. And really, that's the basis of all connection. And really, the basis of love is to feel like we're truly understood by this person. So the 5 different fight languages, we start with the igniters. That's our anger-based response. They don't start the fight, but they're definitely going to end it. And they're going to say mean stuff along the way.
Okay.
They have a core need to feel protected. So when they get in spaces where they don't feel protected, they're going to have that big anger response. Then we have our amplifiers. That's our emotion-based response. These people want to be understood in their emotional experience. They need to know that you get what they're going through. So their core need to be understood is all about their emotions. Then we have the negotiators. These are our connection-based response. So they want to know we're good. We're still connected to each other.
Yeah.
They might come across as kind of like a parent or a teacher or a counselor vibe. They're like either dismissing or saying, I don't think it's that bad. Because they want you to be okay. They want to know that everyone's still connected. Then we have our analyzers, logic-based response. This is our black and white. It's fact, or, I often say analyzers come in with it's facts over feelings. Like, I don't care about your feelings. So they want to be understood as well, but they want to be understood for their logic of the situation. Then we have the extinguishers, escape-based response. They didn't want to be here in this fight to begin with, and they're just figuring out how quickly they can get out of it. So these are the people that you can see kind of shutting down or withdrawing, pulling away when they're in the fight because they know exactly how damaging conflict can be and they don't want it to get worse.
And so once you find out the different fight languages, do you go into how do you respond to someone that's like that? Because I imagine, no two people are alike. So maybe you have a partner or a friend or whoever, you guys maybe share the same fight language, but what if you guys are the complete opposite? And you're just kind of all over the place going at each other, which I imagine could happen. How do you navigate that?
So nobody speaks just one fight language, right? If you take the quiz, it's at fightlanguages.com and you'll find out like what your top 3 fight languages are, which is really helpful to know because depending on the person or the circumstance or maybe what's being triggered for you there, you'll show up with a different fight language. So I think of knowing all 5 is being able to translate somebody's fight language. That's really what the goal is. You're trying to translate what they're saying or yelling at you loudly to what they really mean behind that. Because what they likely mean is something like, I don't think you understand how I'm feeling. I worry we're getting disconnected. I don't feel safe right now. I'm getting overwhelmed. They're not saying those really helpful phrases, though. They're saying, you never listened to me. Why won't you back off? Or something like that.
And then you shut down and then nothing kind of gets resolved.
Yeah, you're speaking your own fight language in that. So no matter what, even if you have no idea what this other person's fight language is, just understanding yours and recognizing that internal reaction before it becomes the external one. Oh my gosh, we've changed 50% of the conversation now. The whole thing's changed.
Have you seen that or just in your experience when you started to implement this?
What
was that change like for you?
So personally, I have young kids. I have a 11 and 14-year-old. So we're all in those preteen feelings and expressions right now. It was a game changer because rather than picking up what they were throwing at me and making it my own and reacting to it, I could see it for what it was. So now this wasn't a kid that was giving me a hard time. This was a kid that was having a hard time. And I could show up with that empathy and connection. I mean, we just don't have conflict anymore. Not that things don't come up and aren't difficult to talk about, but they stay a conversation rather than moving into a fight.
And do your kids know their fight languages? Do they are they understanding how to be able to communicate with you? Or
I
each
don't know.
other?
I'm not sure it's gone that far yet, right? They're still, but they're aware of what they need in a fight, which is a totally different thing, right? I have one kid that's an amplifier. She really needs her experience to be understood. And so I do hear her saying things like, I feel like you're just not hearing me. I feel like you just don't get it. And then I have an analyzer who says things like, this isn't fair, but this doesn't make sense. And so I know I can show, like, those are, keywords every time of like, oh, okay, cool. I know exactly how to meet you in this. And then I work with people one-on-one every day to help them navigate conflict better. I work with couples. I go into businesses to help them mediate conflict or just offer trainings. I've worked with mediation companies internationally to help their mediators better handle conflict. And I have seen it across the board 100% of the time improve the conversations. Without a doubt.
What's the reaction? Do people realize, like, kind of off the bat what their fight language is? And then do they start to see difference and go, oh, I am kind of like that, and
right? We're all so egotistical.
The finger points back, looking in the mirror.
That's exactly what it is. So people, I think, get intrigued just wanting to know, wait, what is my fight language? Tell me more about this. So they come at it, they want to know their own fight language, then they want to identify the person they're fighting with the most to see, see, this is what they do. This is why they're the problem. And it's like my, like subversive, like we're going to get this in the end.
Right.
Because, of course, it always comes back to you and how you've been reactive in these spaces where you're continuing the conflict rather than pivoting it in a new direction.
I love that. Why is conflict so important in our relationships and with parenting too?
Conflict is how we connect with people, right? When it's easy and there's no conflict, that's wonderful, that's amazing, but that's not when we really have that meaningful connection and that growth. So that happens. Conflict is really someone telling us, this is important to me, and I want you to understand more about me. Amazing. That's fantastic. That is how we lean into those spaces and we find that connection. And then we have someone who really feels understood. Well, if you are coming to me and you really want to get me and understand me, oh my gosh, now we're building trust. Now we've got empathy overflowing. Now we have curiosity. This is like we're blowing things out of the water here when it comes to that meaningful connection.
Oh, that makes so much sense. You had mentioned you can take the fight quiz to find out what your fight language is. So I took it on the website. It says I was 30% negotiator. Which it said connection-based reaction, coordinate to reassure connection, and prioritize focusing on own feelings instead of others. And then I think I was 20% the amplifier. I was not, what was the first one where?
Igniter.
I was not 0% igniter. And then what was the final one?
Extinguisher.
I was an extinguisher. So I was 30 of negotiator, 20 of amplifier, and then the other one.
Analyzer.
But I'm more, I think I fell in that category negotiator. I'm people pleaser. I'm kind of like, hey, let's, want to make everybody happy. So
Totally.
I was like, interesting.
So the negotiator is a common one to have as, I think of it as a secondary fight language, even though it's the one you're scoring highest in.
Yeah.
Because it's like a coping skill that you've cultivated to be able to compensate for that amplifier, likely, like a lot of women have that amplifier fight language. And we learn early on, people don't like our feelings. People don't like it when we're in big feelings. And so we come in with that negotiator fight language to say, it's okay. No, it's fine. I'll take care of it.
And I had to, I learned after having my daughter and going through postpartum depression, you can't pour from an empty cup. So I feel like that kind of goes hand in hand. And, as you get older and you learn, you speak, speaking up is so key. And that's why I think this is so imperative. How does this kind of, is it kind of parallel with love languages and fight languages, or are those two totally different, how you receive love and then the fight language?
I haven't particularly found a correlation other than negotiators love acts of service.
I do. To take out the trash, I'm like, okay.
Right? And that's because the negotiator tends to show up as this very giving. They want to do things for other people. So to have that seen and reflected to them is hugely important. Amplifiers, maybe the words of affirmation, but that's because they're external processors. They want to take that internal emotional space and have it seen on the outside. So no, I don't find too much correlation. Again, the love languages are really task focused, whereas the fight languages, I want you to understand this other person, what motivates them, what triggers them, why they have this fight language that they do. And in the book, I go through that for each of the fight languages. What likely happened to this person after talking to many, hundreds of people with these fight languages, why do they fight the way that they do? Let's figure that out.
Why do you think it's so hard for people to express their feelings and to put it into actual words? And, some people are great at it. And, I envy that. I'm not that person. I've grown and I'm learning to do that. But just off the top, I was not just easily here's how I'm feeling. And kind of just no emotion with it.
Right? So
why
this
is that
comes
so hard?
Right back to that parent-child relationship. And when we get reactive, we get defensive.
Yeah.
So if as a kid you showed up, you could articulate your feelings really well. We watch toddlers do it all the time. They're so great at telling us exactly what they think and why they think it.
That's true.
Exactly. But then they hit that defensiveness from someone. So they learned that my emotional experience causes a negative reaction with people that I am biologically programmed to depend on for survival. Well, now I have a pretty good reason to dial back my reaction so I can reassure that connection. So that's why it's hugely important when it comes to parenting just to recognize your own fight language, because now you're not so defensive and reactive when your kids are speaking theirs. You can really hear what they're saying and they don't have to downshift and hide their own emotions.
Yeah, and as they get older and older, they probably just learn to kind of compartmentalize, and then you're unpacking it all as an adult and you're here having a podcast learning about fight languages.
Full circle.
What is the best place for people to start and kind of wanting to navigate this and learning more about their fight language? I know you have the book and you can go on and take the quiz. How do you kind of, for lack of a better word, dumb it down for people as a place to start?
I mean, if you want the lowest entry fee possible, then head to social media. I have a huge amount of content. I've been posting for 3 years on this now. So if it comes, whatever fight language you suspect you are, or if you're like most people, you're like, I want to understand my husband and why he is so terrible at having these conversations. Okay, fair enough. Great. Go learn about the analyzer, the igniter. figure out more about those fight languages. It's going to help you recognize your own. So start with social media. Just start to get a grasp of it there. You can work with me one-on-one if you want to take a deep dive on your own, or you're, say you're having struggles with someone, a kid, a parent, a coworker. If you come and work with me, we're going to change everything about that without ever involving that other person at all. But I do work with couples as well who want to be fighting better in their relationship. The book is available, hard copy, on Kindle, on Audible, however you want to get your books. I've got you.
And just, working with a couple or maybe a parent example, does one stand out that they came in and were just two opposites, and you working with them, what was kind of like the light bulb switch moment?
Sure. I remember I had a dad and a teenage daughter that came to work with me because they were just not, the teenage daughter was shutting down every time. He was exploding in anger once that happened. So he was the igniter, she was the extinguisher. And by having the conversation in a neutral space about okay, knowing igniters, I suspect this is probably what's happening for you. He was able to be like, oh my gosh, that is exactly. And she was able to realize, wow, I literally had no idea, because we tend to assume everyone else is interpreting the information the way we are, right?
Right.
And so to realize for him, once he got frustrated, he needed to hit pause in that conversation and pick it back up at a later time rather than waiting until rage when he's exploding.
Yeah.
And that meant that they could have these really productive conversations that were maybe just in short bites, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Someone would get frustrated or feel like shutting down. Cool, we need to hit pause. We're going to pivot in a new direction. We're going to pick it up later. And now it was really productive.
That's good. I imagine as you keep practicing those little moments, you eventually will become an expert in your own fight language.
Yep.
What are some common mistakes that people make when dealing with conflict, and how can they shift toward more productive conversations?
We stay in the fight too long. That is the number one thing that I see people doing, is as soon as that defensiveness comes in, we think, okay, I'm going to convince the other person that I'm right and they're wrong. 0% of the time has that ever worked, because now we just have two defensive people trying to convince someone else. It's never going to work. What would be far more effective is to realize you're getting defensive. Say, you know what? Unless this is life or death, which it rarely is, let me give it 5 minutes. And that's what people tend to think, is if I let this go, it's gone forever.
Yeah.
Right? If I
never get brought back up.
Yes, exactly.
We'll stew on it.
And what I have found across the board, because extinguishers most notoriously need a minute. They need time to ponder it, to think about it. We all move fast, right? In a fight, we move really fast, and the extinguishers are left behind immediately. But what I found is when I ask them, okay, how much time do you need? It's 5 minutes. It's 10 minutes. It's not the days that the rest of us are out here assuming that we're going to have to wait.
Right.
So once you get defensive, hit pause. Don't fight fast. Slow it down. And the number one thing I wish people would do is have someone's words come out of their mouth and fall to the floor, and look at them there. Because what we tend to do is someone says something to us, it triggers us, and we grab
you feel it in your whole body.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You have taken
then
this
you don't
in.
hear anything else
Nope.
past that.
It's done. And now you're just fighting back against what their words made you feel. Right?
You're reacting to the feeling more so.
Yeah. If you can watch the words come out of their mouth and fall to the floor, this is so helpful with kids as well. You're looking at it on the floor and you're telling them what you see. That's it. Now we have kept our own autonomy in the conversation. We have our own feelings. They're separate from what was said. And now we're actually going to have a conversation that goes somewhere. So it looks like you're feeling really frustrated right now. It looks like you think I was lying to you. It looks like whatever it is. That other person's going to get to fact check you and say, no, what I'm feeling is this. Okay, I'm looking at that on the floor now. It looks like you're not sure what you're feeling. You're just really angry, you know?
I've never looked at it that way. Now I'm going to be looking at the floor. You're going to have people, why are you looking at the floor, Mom, Dad? I'm looking at it and trying to, navigate this. What silent treatment? I know a lot of people, that's their go-to, and they feel like that's effective, which I imagine it is not.
It's a power move, right? It's a power move for everyone except the person that's doing it.
Yeah.
So this is typically our extinguishers, and you might have extinguisher in there where you show up with this, it doesn't go well, and you just shut down and withdraw. So the extinguisher is the ultimate power move of the fight languages, even though every extinguisher I've ever talked to is like, me in power? No. Oh my gosh. I'm just trying to survive. So if someone's giving you the silent treatment, that's totally fine. What's not fine is not setting a time to hit play again. So this other person has hit pause. Fantastic. They've identified they're overwhelmed, that this isn't going anywhere, and that they need to hit pause so they can regroup and come back to the conversation. But what tends to happen, we take that personally, right? We assume this person's saying, I don't care about you or your feelings or what you think, which is not at all what's being said. And so to say to them like, hey, we can hit pause. That's no problem. Take all the time you need. We have to set a time to hit play again. So I'm reassured that this conversation will continue. So helpful.
Yeah, otherwise it'll just go on. And then, it's the longer it goes on, I'm sure the more confusion and things happen.
Oh, absolutely. And the more we start to make it mean about us.
Yeah.
Right? So the amplifiers out there are going to be like, see, you don't care how I'm feeling.
And then that's another conflict.
Right.
I love just the conflict into connection. Are there any green flags when it comes to conflict and quote unquote fights?
Absolutely. Yeah. Anytime someone's willing to wade into the hard conversation with you, even if you're doing it badly, the intent there, fantastic. Right? This is a skill. We can practice this. We can get better at having these hard conversations. So do it badly while letting the person know, like, hey, this is me trying this new skill. I really want to be able to connect with you in it. Here's my best shot. How did that go? It humanizes it. It connects us even in the uncomfortable in between when we're still fighting badly. And then repair. Man, the fights matter so much less than the repair. Right? Being able to come back to someone and saying, hey, I don't like how that went. That didn't feel good for me. How did it feel for you? Here's what I would like to try differently next time. How does this sound to you? The repair is what makes that meaningful growth happen in our relationships.
And, I imagine for like you have a husband and wife or partnerships, parent to child, you're comfortable with that person if you're having some conflict. What about when you have to, like you mentioned, you bring this into like the workplace where that can get a little bit, I'm sure, dicey, or it's boss employee.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that, or how do you navigate, an employee maybe is trying to stand up for themselves? But you mentioned as long as you know your fight language, it kind of helps, I guess, guide that conversation.
That's exactly it. If you're dealing with someone you've got a big power differential happening here and you feel really nervous about it, understanding your own fight language means you're not going to revert to what I call more protective traits. And that's, you could call it more negative sides of the fight language. They're not. They're just protective behaviors that we have. And you can stay in your productive behaviors instead. So say you're an amplifier. Well, you know that you have a tendency to get really overwhelmed in the feelings and you don't want to start crying and you don't want to, get angry. Okay, cool. So if you're feeling reactive at all about this, then maybe doing it over text or email would be a better scenario to start that conversation so that you aren't getting trapped in those big emotions coming out. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Or if you're an analyzer, well, you know that you tend to go point for point and you really want to fact check everything. So maybe saying that out loud, this is making me want to go point for point with this, and I don't think that's going to be helpful. Can we hit pause? Let's pick this conversation back up later. Again, just being aware of your own reactive response changes the conversation.
And I'm sure these are tools that you can use. Maybe it might not necessarily be a full-blown fight or argument, but what if you're in line and somebody cuts you off or irritates you, or you're having to deal with someone running an errand? These would probably come in handy.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, I mean, the very first way that they become handy is we start thinking, what's their fight language? Right? And that brings curiosity.
Yeah, it does.
Curiosity, that's the first step in empathy. So once we have that, even if, we're just joking or this person cut us off in line, I bet they're an igniter or something like that. Okay, but now we have curiosity about it and we're trying to understand their experience. Already, we're not in that reactive space.
Talk a little bit about boundaries, healthy boundaries where people want to put them up, but a lot of times some people might take that as a negative. But
Oh, absolutely.
how do you kind of navigate around that?
I love boundaries, particularly because I feel like most of the time we're talking about boundaries in this really weird way where it's like this set of rules that we're giving to someone. Of course they react to that.
People feel sometimes disrespected if you set boundaries.
Right, exactly. So what a boundary is an invitation to the game that you want to play and letting them know what you're going to do if we're not able to play that game. So I think boundaries are often used as like a set of rules of like, you must or you should. Who on the earth isn't going to get reactive and defensive to that? Of course. So if you can say, hey, here's how I want to engage with you, and here's what I'm going to do if we're not able to do that, it just takes all of that power back for yourself, where if that other person's not able to, that's no problem. Literally, it's not your problem. You know what you're going to go do instead now. So with your kids, boundaries, we've got the two types here. We've got health and safety, and then we've got personal relationships, right? So with your kids, they're yelling, they're screaming, hey, listen, I'm not going to be able to talk to you if you're screaming like that, but if you can talk in this voice, I really want to have this conversation with you. Again, it's the invitation to the game you want to play with them.
Yeah, and you can set healthy boundaries, but that was always kind of, that word always kind of gets people a little, kind of rouse people up.
Yep, totally. And so you can, with the fight languages, if you set that boundary and you see that reaction from the other person, again, we've got curiosity. What fight language are they speaking now? And that lets you know what's being triggered for them. They're not able to articulate it, right? They're just pointing fingers saying, you're so controlling. Why do you, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you can say, oh, but they're coming with anger. This is an igniter. They don't feel safe. What about this might not feel safe for them right now?
And what do you say to someone if they're doing the work, wanting to find out what their fight language is, maybe how to navigate people and relationships in their life, but maybe just that one person, it's not working with them, whether that person is in a space to receive it, but you still show up and you're doing the work. How do you kind of navigate that frustration? I guess they're not, listening, or you keep continuing on and doing you?
So you're going to focus on your experience with that, right? Because you have no control over them and you never had any control over them. We move through a lot of our relationships pretending like we have control over these other people. That we don't. So to recognize, okay, I have no control over how this person's going to respond. I only have control over my reaction. Then I'm going to choose who is it that I'm giving energy to? Who is it that I'm putting effort in with? And who is it that I'm just going to keep on a superficial level because they've let me know they're not capable of having the conversations that I want to be having? Okay. That's fine. It's free will for everyone.
Yeah, that is so true. And once you start practicing that, you just are kind of more in a peaceful space.
Yep.
And exactly. I think people eventually see that. Eventually people will see it might be hard for them to navigate in the beginning, or you're changing and you're doing this. But, sometimes a lot of people don't like when you grow.
Exactly.
And you're changing. Like you're allowed to learn the fight languages and implement that next week, today, tomorrow.
Exactly. It's such a good point because people always want what's familiar.
Yeah.
And so if you start changing even in small ways about how you're showing up in that same old fight you've had 100 times, right? It's different, and different feels unsafe, and people are always going to have that kind of reaction to it that says, wait, why are you doing this? What happens now? I know how this fight goes every time because we follow the same pattern.
Yeah.
Why are you changing it?
Interesting. Why are you looking at the floor?
Yeah, exactly.
This is so fascinating. You mentioned online folks can find you on, I'm sure, all the socials. If you want to let folks know your website and they can reach out to you, how do you work with folks? And, if they want to message you, do you accept all of that?
Totally.
Okay.
So you can go to fightlanguages.com. All of my contact info's on there. And if you're figuring out how, if you have a teenager that you're trying to navigate conflict with differently, if you're a boss, that's a huge effect when I can go in and work with a leadership team at a company because it changes the entire culture of the company. Now we're communicating differently. Really, any space that you feel like this communication is not as effective as it could be, I'd love to work with you. I do online Zoom sessions. Okay. I go into local businesses and work with other people online.
Love that. Well, this is such an interesting topic. Thank you so much for, I had no idea this existed. Now I do. Now you do. You're watching and listening. I like to let my guests have kind of the final say, last word, anything that you want to mention or add that whether it relates to this or something that I didn't ask or you feel that's just important to share.
Sure. I think right now more than ever, the fight languages are so critically important because we have a world that is becoming increasingly soaked in conflict. We're seeing it, every social media platform, every news age. It's a conflict-filled world right now. So to be able to feel like you have tools to navigate that, we don't have control over what's happening, but we all have control over ourselves. And the fight languages are really an exceptional tool to feel like you have control over how you're reacting to this world that feels a little out of control.
Oh, great advice. Well, Lena, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your words of wisdom here on the fight languages.
Thank you.
Such a great topic. And thank you all for listening to another episode of Parenting in the Far North. Don't forget to like and subscribe.